Do you have trouble talking about your feelings? You're not alone. It's a topic that can make even the most powerful people somewhat squeamish. You're listening to Feelings Matter, where our mission is to demystify everything about emotions so that we can all get more comfortable talking about them. Join Tina and Michelle every week as we unpack a new angle on emotions, drawing upon the science of the brain and the psychology of human nature.
I'm Michelle Stinson-Ross.
I'm Tina Schweiger.
You are listening to Feelings Matter. Today is a science topic. I'm so excited to talk about the experience sampling method. And everybody's like, what? Yeah, don't worry about it. We're going to help you out here. But yeah, we want to talk today about the experience sampling method and how that is important to understanding feelings and emotions and et cetera, et cetera. And actually, that is my first question for you, Tina. What does the experience sampling method have to do with feelings and emotions? What's the connection there?
So there's this elusive feeling called flow. The feeling you get when you're really, really focused on your task. Let's say you're an artist. I do some artwork. It's behind my head. You're a musician, guitar player, drummer, or an athlete. Maybe you're a rock climber. You know flow, though you may not really have thought about what it's called. So flow is that feeling when you're in the middle of your craft or task and you really lose track of time. All of a sudden, all this time has passed and you look up and you're like, wait, how did it get to be noon already? Well, it's almost an unconscious feeling, like it's happening in your brain and you're so focused on what you're doing. You're so present in the moment that you've let go of all the typical narratives and worries and all the things that are going on in your head. And you're just focused on what you're doing and you're experiencing a state of flow.
I have had several instances where I really got into flow and the story was just just absolutely coming off of my fingertips, whether I was writing by hand or whether I was at the keyboard. And yeah, I have experienced that where I felt like I had spent days with these characters telling their story. And then I look up and I'm like, wow, I actually got all of that done. What time is it?
Exactly. That's it. Or if you're jogging or running and you get to the runner's high, you probably went through flow first or maybe at that time. It's a feeling that's a really positive feeling and it has benefits for your physical health. Back to experience sampling method. What does this have to do with it?
Yes.
Well, experience sampling method is what actually helped a scientist discover the state of flow. That's why we actually know what it's called and we have a lot of writing about it and we can kind of get our arms around it and define it and, heaven forbid, create a state of flow for ourselves.
What is kind of the basic thumbnail definition of experience sampling method?
So if you think about an experience, that's just the word itself. What is an experience? Right now, you're listening to a podcast. You're having an experience. And if you think about the word sampling and the idea that I'm going to take a sample of your experience in this moment right now, let's think about your emotional state. What is your emotional state right now? Are you taking a break, trying to clear your mind, getting some peace? Are you curious and maybe skeptical or, happy? We pick up that feeling or that what your experience is in this moment, and that's the sample. If you can imagine collecting multiple of those throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout the year, or any length of time, and you think about collecting multiple of those over many people, you can imagine how many data points that would create for a scientist to use for their research. That's why they call it experience sampling method that's used in science, social sciences research.
Okay. So how was it developed?
It was developed, and I love the story. It is developed inspired by technology. I love technology if you haven't figured out by now. the 70s. Let's go back. And that's when the pager was invented. That's the first time that we were, as a society, really able to interrupt each other in the middle of what we're doing and get attention. That was for those of you that are too young, it was a little black square and it has a digital display on the top and a little clip. And usually people would clip it, like doctors or lawyers, police would clip it to their pants, and then it would start beeping. They called it a beeper sometimes. It would start beeping when something needs attention, and they would look at the beep, and they'd see a phone number, and they'd pick up their phone, the nearest like landline physical phone, and like probably like rotary dial, the numbers and call, like, hey, what do you need? So we were able to interrupt somebody. That gave the scientist, the researcher named, I'm going to try to pronounce it, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. It's hard to even Google because there's a C and a Z and an I and a K and an M and some other letters. And it's like this long. Awards to this guy for the craziest, longest last name ever. I did have to go to YouTube to actually even figure out how to pronounce Csíkszentmihályi. So he was studying social sciences as a professor and a researcher. And he thought, hey, there's these pager things. I think it would be great for my studies participants if I could ding them and interrupt their day and figure out what's going on at the moment. So he would give everybody a pager, he would attach it to them, and then he would randomly ping them and interrupt them at different times of the day. And in his case, it was, okay, stop and fill a form. What are you doing right now? How do you feel about it right now? And there's a variety of other questions he would gather in the moment. And they would physically write it down on paper. That's kind of cool.
Cool. And this is how they discovered that state of flow and could begin to measure it and understand it.
Yeah. If you can imagine how many data points you'd have to collect to take a concept or a theory and actually like prove it, it's a lot, and it's a lot of time, and it's a lot of statistical work. They did all of the statistical magic, and based on what somebody is doing at the time, the reported state of how they're feeling, and how that data lines up with everything else, they're able to define the state of flow. To dive into it one level deeper, there are a few things that they determined that can define the state of flow. Mm-hmm. One is the one we were talking about, which is you've lost track of time. It's, I don't know. I was really so focused on what I was doing. I don't even know if it's been an hour or 5 minutes. That's a characteristic that they found to be consistent with state of flow. Okay. Also, you'll find that the intrinsic motivation. So the thing you're doing right now, are you doing it because you want to be doing it? Or are you doing it because someone else is telling you to do it? If you're doing it because you really want to be doing it, that's the quality for a state of flow. And finally is the amount of focus that it takes. So the thing that you're doing needs to be not too easy and not too hard, which is why this is common among athletes and artists, because they practice their craft over and over again. Mm-hmm. But they're doing something that's really, if the layperson picked it up, it'd be super difficult. I couldn't pick up a clarinet and just start playing. They got to practice that a lot. So there's this in-between sweet spot where the level of challenge is perfect, to where you're going to feel like you're accomplishing something, yet you're still challenged to make it perfect or to express it the way you want to do it. Those three things, they will line up. And when they do line up, you're in that magical state of flow.
Excellent. Going back to the experience sampling method, I know you said that they used pagers, that they used technology, something emergent for the very first time. So it did change the way psychological and sociological experimentation is done. How is that different? How is it similar from a survey? Because obviously surveys are the things that we tend to see the most of when we're trying to measure mental health, that self-assessment that you have to do for your therapist or your doctor if you need to like renew your prescription or something like that. So a lot of us, especially for those of us that are trying to take care of our mental health, we see surveys all the time. How is this different or similar or what from a survey?
It's different. They can coexist or they can not coexist. First and foremost, the one doesn't replace the other one. If you're filling out a survey, you're in a position to probably think about something or a situation in the past and recall it and then report that. For example, on the mental health surveys, how many times in the past 2 weeks have you been depressed or felt sad? You have to kind of go, I don't know how many times. And they usually say, well, your best guess is okay, because that alone, that question can kind of stymie anybody. Like, I can't remember what I was doing yesterday, much less within the last 2 weeks. So the big deal with surveys is they do rely on your memory, and our memory is faulty, and our brains change things, after they've happened. It's pretty documented that our brains will just re-scramble what happened, and we have a whole new reality that you're reporting on in that survey. Pairing it with or using an experience sample in the moment, it's challenging because it can be intrusive. So it's not something I would say you want to do unless you have a good reason to. Imagine getting a pager going off every couple hours or every few days, just saying, hey, what are you doing right now? Hey, how do you feel right now? It's really cool to learn, and it's really cool to get information that a person can report on in the moment and doesn't have to actually go back and remember later. Those are the differences, and I think when you pair them together, and it can be, hey, right now is when I need you to fill that survey. So you can even use them as a reminder to fill a survey if that's what it is. Mm-hmm. But it's really capturing that in the moment experience, and that's what the difference is.
Support for this podcast comes from Mindful Appy. Your feelings matter, and Mindful Appy can prove it. Try it out for free right now. Grab your phone and text the emoji that best represents how you feel to 972-480-6715. See how your feelings compare with other listeners of the Feelings Matter podcast. Again, text the emoji to 972-480-6715. And now back to the conversation with Tina and Michelle.
I have a thought on the state of flow. I think, given that we've all been in COVID and quarantine, really important to note that there's a lot of good research on getting into a flow state, helping your stress level and being able to reduce your stress level.
I'd love for you to unpack that a little bit, please.
Let's unpack that just a bit. Stress is a killer. It's the number one killer. And it's something really that's prompted myself and Michelle to just jump on this Feelings Matter podcast right now. We are just not around each other as much as we are. We're suffering from lack of community and social support. Mm-hmm. And that just increases our isolation, our levels of stress. And we really do need to pay attention more to what's going on in the moment, what's going on around us, what's going on in our body, and what can we do to help mitigate our stress level. I think that flow is something that you can tackle. Say, you know what, I think I'm going to try to set up an experiment myself and take up an activity. We can put a list in that will get me into the state of flow. A lot of studies have shown that the state of flow can reduce the stress hormones and all the chemicals that are going on in your body that are making you stressed out, help you feel better. So it's good for your mental health. Recommended by doctors and scientists to help mitigate some of the stress. So that's the unpacking of that, and a good reason to give it a try.
I can recommend an activity if you want, because this is one place that I realized that I was experiencing flow. So I'm a weirdo, and I happen to like social dancing. So Latin dancing, like salsa, tango, or ballroom dancing, waltz, all of that kind of stuff. Yeah, I like ballroom. But what I discovered was in those periods of time where I was actually taking dance instruction. So when I was either in a class of a bunch of people, which we can't quite do yet, hopefully soon, or even with one-on-one instruction, I definitely experienced that feeling of time just passed. Wait a second, we've been doing this for 45 minutes already. Too soon, let's not stop yet. But I also experienced that feeling of I was really focused and very much in that moment learning that thing because the music was playing and I was having to pay attention to how I was moving my body. I was absolutely focused in that moment. I had let everything else go for just a few minutes to be there in that moment to learn that thing. And yeah, that was when I discovered, I found something that's not only good physical exercise, but also really good mental health exercise. I realized that I was just present.
Nice.
And it would reduce my stress. Obviously, the physical activity is important to reducing stress, but also just that practice of presence, of letting everything else go, not worrying about what's going to happen next or trying to sort out what happened before, but being right there in that moment. That really helped a lot. Pairing it with a physical activity would really reduce my stress. And I really, really miss my dance classes. COVID. I was like, I want to get back to the studio so badly right now.
What does everyone miss? Like, if you have a chat open, tell us, what do you miss? What do you miss these days? I'd love to know.
What gets you in the state of flow now that you know what it is? What do you miss that you're not able to do right now because of COVID that gets you into the state of flow? That was, for me, one of the things that I really noticed really early on when I started learning dance was that, I just let everything go for that period of time. And I feel so much better for having done it.
That's so great. I know the last thing I want to touch on is flow at work. You can get there at work. If you're maybe a software developer, you probably know this, or a writer, you're somebody who's producing content, or you're maybe an accountant and you're just digging around for details and facts and trying to uncover something or make something happen. You can get into a state of flow. Interestingly, as a consultant in the past, what I have done a lot of, which is when we could be doing things in person, design thinking workshops. So these are innovation workshops where I would get a team of people together and we would bring an executive team together and give them a series of creative tasks and drawing tasks and different tasks that would help them think of their organization in a different way, visually or linear through time, or think about their organization from the eyes of their customers or the people that they serve. We would have these workshops that would stretch for half a day or a full day. I found at the end of it, a lot of the clients would say, I can't believe that was a whole day. I mean, goodness, that went by so fast. I'd see people high-fiving at the end and just having a good time, and they're more aligned on where they're going in business. And I started researching, is that flow? And I did find, I'll put a link to it, a research study done in Germany in 2018 by a professor who got a group of students together and did specifically design thinking methods. So like affinity clustering and experience diagramming and all these different things, and used experience sampling method with these groups of people who were given a task and given a workshop to do throughout the day. This scientist did prove that design thinking methods can get not only a person into a state of flow, but a whole group of people. There's really interesting, and we're so early in our research in positive psychology, which is the father of that is Csikszentmihalyi, and I think experience sampling helps us capture those fleeting positive moments as they go, and flow is one of those. There's so many possibilities of how we can capitalize on things that we've learned already, and we can learn new things using that method and get together and maybe become an orchestra where we're in flow together, and we'll all get the benefit from that.
What are some of the problems that the original experience sampling method had?
I mentioned it before. It's the interruption factor. I went on my Google Scholar and I searched for all my experience sampling method studies. And the biggest similarity that I found between all of them was attrition. So people would agree to do the study, they'd get started with it, and then a large percentage in some of the studies, half of the people had dropped off before the study finished. And maybe in some of the lower level instances, it was 20%.
How has technology brought us forward and maybe overcomes some of those original problems? And how have you been able to adapt this to helping to measure emotional awareness?
When I read the article or I learned about Csíkszentmihályi and flow, I was immediately drawn to it. And I have had a similar inspiration with technology, and that is our smartphones. They're so much faster and easier to respond with than pagers. So, and I also don't have to carry around a notebook and pens and paper because I lose pens and paper and I don't know where they are. I can't find them. I can't keep up with anything in the physical world. My whole world is digital. I've been a technology designer since before the internet. Started making websites as soon as I could. And one day I was like, hey, emotions. Look at all these emojis here. Look at all the different feelings we can represent with emojis. And wouldn't that be a lot easier than going through a paper that says, how angry do you feel right now? How happy do you feel right now? And trying to rate it all. And by the time I've answered that whole thing, I don't even know how I was feeling because now I'm just frustrated that I was interrupted and I had to fill out a big form. Technology-wise, I think there's a really good case to have a resurgence in experience sampling method, and I think it could help our technology aspirations as a culture move forward with better machine learning, with better algorithms, with better artificial intelligence, because we can get an example of what people are really experiencing in the moment, what they're doing, and how they're feeling, and what other context is around that. Mindful Appy is a result of that inspiration. It's an experience sampling method platform that uses the emoji instead of having a person stop everything they're doing, fill out a form for how they feel right now in the moment. They can just pull up their phone and they can click the smiley face or my head is exploding. I'm really mad. I'm skeptical. Not only are there different levels of affect, meaning feeling good or feeling bad, there's also different kinds of moods and emotion, like a strong arm. I'm feeling really strong. So you can actually capture even more feeling and emotional contextual information with that sample than we could with just using a pager and stop and fill out this positive and negative affect scale form. That's where that comes into play in my world.
So we went from a pager that would go off and you'd have to stop what you were doing and either fill out a really long form or pick up a phone and answer somebody's questions over the phone in that moment. And that could take goodness only knows how long. And because once you've done it once or twice, it's like, I'm not even going to pay attention to that pager anymore. I may just take the thing off and leave it in a drawer somewhere. I'm not even going to participate anymore because that took too long, too difficult, whatever, to the point now where we can, because the technology is better, the device is better, right? The smartphone is capable of so much more. For one thing, that two-way communication can happen on a smartphone where it couldn't on the pager. Pager was one way.
It was.
This device is definitely two-way. When it goes off and interrupts me, it's really easy to respond back. And that's one of the brilliant things I think the emoji is. I don't have to spend a lot of time responding back. I'm a lot more willing to pay attention to that thing if all I have to do is choose an emoji, put the phone back down, and go on with whatever it was I was doing. Mm-hmm. I really like that about it. Also, one of the things I really like is because of the way the system processes that emoji, it never discloses who posted what emoji or what that emoji actually was. So if I'm really, really having just a crappy day when I'm asked, hey, how you feeling? If I want to use the poop emoji, I can. There's no judgment there. I think that's one of the really mindful aspects of this particular system is that there's no judgment. You post whatever emoji it is you're feeling. No, it's not going to be disclosed to anybody else. This is strictly just you reporting how you feel. And the only one that's ever going to see that is you yourself.
Right. And the once it goes into the Mindful Appy system, has a little engine that just scrambles up your phone number, and we don't often have your name or your email address. It just becomes a data point for whoever's going to receive it on the other end. And it's also translated through a couple of other things. So it's impossible to really reverse engineer. Mindful Appy is for the workplace. And if you can imagine just psychological safety being an issue, if I'm on a PIP, let's say I'm in trouble at work and I need to make sure my performance is up to snuff, but at the same time I get a employee experience survey. How honest am I going to be if I'm actually not feeling so good? I may actually fill out that survey quite the opposite because I want to make my manager happy or know that I have that positive attitude and I'm being a good worker. So I'm not going to actually disclose to you how I really feel if I'm frustrated or if I'm stressed, if I'm terrified. In fact, if I could just give you an emoji that no one would ever see and it would go through a mystery engine that would obscure it and it would just be aggregated among a bunch of other people's data and interpreted, then I'd probably be a little bit more okay sharing that I was terrified because it didn't have to get back to me. And then I wouldn't have that manager looking at me and going, hey, dude, you're already on a PIP. So, it looks like your survey showing you're a little afraid, you're unhappy. You need to pick up that attitude. You need to turn it around. That could be coercive. It could only increase the stress. It could do a lot of damage to a person. So it's really, really important. We put a lot of thought into how we collect and gather this information from people because I almost treat it like health data. It's your own private inner state. And we really want to make sure that stays private to you.